How are you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. I see Warrant's got a big show coming up this weekend. It is the Holiday Bash, of course, with Frontiers Records. You guys will be joined with LA Guns and Jack Russell's Great White, Vivian Campbell's River Dogs. What a great show. We're going to talk about that. But for our listeners, we want to bring them full to date here. I know you were born in Indiana but grew up in Irvine. What was it like, growing up loving rock and roll, in the shadows of Hollywood, coming into the clubs and wanting to get in that scene that, Van Halen and so many other bands had exploded from?
Yeah, really fortunate. Indiana, roots are there. I'm a Hoosier, but really fortunate my dad, through his work, got transferred to Southern California during that time when all those bands were being cultivated and coming up. And I just, I used to go up to the Starwood when it was open, and when you heard Van Halen's going to be playing, and try to catch them, because by the time I got onto them, they were already an international band, so I never got to see them in the clubs. I did get to see some other people in the clubs before they got signed, which was killer. So just a great way to grow up as somebody who wanted to play rock and roll for a living,
Yeah, and I know you had been in quite a few bands, coming up through the days, playing covers, coming up with original material. But talk about, meeting, Jerry Dixon and Eric Turner and, the formation of what became Warrant.
Basically, I grew up down in Orange County, like what you said, Irvine, and I was in bands over in Anaheim and jamming a lot. And I was in a band a few years before Warrant even started called Nightmare 2. And this skinny little dude that had a Flying V and a Marshall stack named Eric Turner wanted to jam with my band. So that's where I met Eric prior to when Warrant ever got going. And we jammed for, I don't know, a few months maybe. Recollection's hard, it's been a long time. And then I bailed and went to another band, and he bailed and moved to Hollywood, or at least LA, and that's when Warrant started. So we kept in touch back in the day, and he always said, come see my band, come see my band. I never did, because I was still stuck in Orange County doing my thing. And one fateful weekend when I did move to LA, I ran into him out on the Sunset Strip, and they were looking for a lead guitar player. So, to cut to the chase, that's kind of the edited quick version.
Yeah.
But yeah, I met Jerry on a weekend, and that meeting was kind of awkward, because I guess I was kind of a jerk, he said in hindsight, because I'm like, dude, I don't care if this band's got to wear, whatever, pantyhose, as long as the music's good, I'm in, And here we are, I don't know how many other years later, 30, 40 years later.
Yeah.
We're still rocking and having a great time. And the best of friends, so, blessed.
Well, it's that age-old story of, people coming to L.A. and, trying to live their dream. And, one song or one band leads to another, and, you get signed and you get put out there in the big leagues. I know, obviously, Motley Crue had exploded, and Poison had come out from Pennsylvania, and they took off. And, you guys were right there in the firing lines, and I know it was very frustrating. I've spoken to Jerry and everybody about it, just like, well, when's it our turn? So many bands, but, the labels are looking at it from a whole different perspective. Like, well, what can we really get on radio, and what bands can really pull this off night after night on a grueling tour? Tell us a little bit about the story of getting signed. I know Ron Oberman and Columbia Records, were checking you guys out. What was the story behind that?
The way I remember it is that, and everybody's got different memories, right, because this stuff's so old, but Brett Hartman, who was an intern at Columbia at the time, brought Ron out to a show. Ron, who ended up signing the band, he had the signing authority, so he was the guy that signed the band. But yeah, to give Brett some credit, Brett's the one that, said, hey, Ron, come and check this band out. I think they might be something we might be interested in here. And so he came out, and I think the show, if I remember right, Janie had chicken pox. And so it was an abbreviated show. It was at the Country Club out in Reseda, which is now, I think, a church.
Yeah.
And he came out. We did like a 45-minute set where we used to do like an hour and a half, just to get the guy home so he could get better. He didn't want to not play. Janie didn't. He was a trooper, but that was it. And then we got the call from our then management, who was Tom Hewlett and Eddie Winrick, that, hey, Columbia's interested, they want to sign the band, and it was like, finally, It seemed like it took forever, but in hindsight, it really didn't take that long at all. I think we were just on that impatient mode,
Yeah, and I know, the big power ballads were, obviously big on MTV and radio at that time, and, you guys exploded, with Heaven, besides the rockers, on Dirty, Rotten, Filthy, Stinkin' Rich, How much credit do you give to that song, Heaven, maybe one of the reasons why you got signed?
I'd have to ask Ron, but I wouldn't think it wouldn't be high on the radar, because at that time, you're right. I mean, that was the power ballad era. And that song live wasn't anything like what it really turned out to be on Dirty, Rotten, Filthy, Stinkin' Rich. It was it had more of an upbeat tempo. It didn't really mellow out like it does now, or when we recorded it. So, that got produced. It happens, and but I think it had a big part to do with it. And every night we play that song, we play it true to fashion. And it's very important for us to pay homage to the past and play those songs to the T. So we have a lot of fun with it. But no disrespect to any old tunes, man. I have a lot of fun playing them all.
Yeah, and I know, obviously, I was at the Cherry Pie release party down at Prince's old Glam Slam Club, and quite a night, and, I know, while Janie would exclaim, he was a little tired of the Cherry Pie contest and all that came with that. Obviously, that song really still to this day is a signature Warrant song and opened up so many people to the band. What was your feeling going into the second album?
Yeah, my whole take on it, and I can understand why he could get a little miffed on it, because that's all anybody ever wanted to talk about, and in hindsight, if you look at it, to me, it's kind of a piece of pop culture, if you look back now, and you've got that song that's just that anthemic, song that just rocks, and it is what it is. A guy that writes hundreds of songs might not want to be known for that, for his whole catalog. But in hindsight, it's also great to be able to play that song every night, because people freak on it every night. It's not got that vibe where you're embarrassed to play it. You know what I mean? Which he seemed embarrassed at the time, but I think he was more just bummed out that people weren't recognizing the more serious stuff he was getting into. Sure. But when you're known for a song like Cherry Pie, I mean, how serious can we get? It's just rock and roll at the end of the day, from my perspective. But that was what it was back then. So
Understood.
Take it for what it is.
Yeah, an iconic video that gets played every day. Now, obviously, you took a break in, May of '94, and of course, your background with your father and electronics and everything, you did your thing, with software. And tell us about that decision to leave, and then, ultimately, the decision to come back.
The decision to leave was just a personal one. I wasn't in a good place. I was going through a divorce. I'm sure the story's been told a million times by a million different people, but I felt like I really just needed to take a right turn and get off that whole NASCAR, circuit of going round and round and doing the same thing all the time, because I was just partying too hard. I wasn't getting anything done. The band wasn't, really doing good at the time. I made a few bad decisions when it came to people I hung out with at the time. Yeah. But I learned from them, and I bailed out of leaving the band was a necessity for me just to stay alive at the time. When I finally got it together and said, hey, I got to go to school, I went back to school. I got Microsoft certified. I worked for some software company for a while. Then I went and worked for one of the companies that used their database, kind of managed their database. And then in 2004, I got an email. I'd always kept in touch with Eric. We've been friends forever. I ain't going to change, just because I split the band. And he said, "Hey, man, do you want to jam?" And I said, "Wow, yeah, why not?" It had been enough time. I had my collective pieces of my life together again, and then we got together and jammed, and it was just like, wow, this is fun again. Because it wasn't fun when I bailed, and it wasn't fun not because necessarily the guys in the band, but just where I was as a person.
Yeah.
And to be able to go, hey man, that was real, and be responsible for what I did, and come full circle, it made sense. And when we got back together and Jerry and Eric and I jammed, and it was with Mike Fasano on drums and Jamie St. James on vocals, the three of us guys, the stringed guys, it sounded great,
Yeah.
It's the Warrant sound from the stringed instruments portion of the band.
And, obviously the business has evolved where now you can, do fly dates. You can go in and play a festival or a weekend and come home and, do this without a major label. And obviously there's, your pockets of fans out there and different events that, really want to hear that great, 80s, 90s, type, bands. So obviously that had a lot to do with it where, you weren't on that hamster wheel of going out and, just blowing your brains out for a major label and, kind of able to do it at your own pace and pick what shows you want to do. And, how much did that have to do with being able to come back in the band and still have a regular life?
You know what? Nobody's ever asked. That's a really, really good perspective, and that probably has a lot to do with it because everybody's, obviously older. The surviving members, and we've all got families and wives and kids, and that's just a part of life that we all want to be a part of, is raising our kids and being responsible fathers and husbands and all this stuff, So being able to get off the road and make the labels their money, which you're right, you nailed it on the head. That's probably in part why the labels aren't around anymore, because maybe they got a little too greedy and didn't keep their eye on what was important, But being able to do that makes a huge difference from my perspective, because I've got a 26-year-old daughter that I helped raise, and I was a part of her life every step of the way, and I've got a 5-year-old son now. I'm married twice. I had to do it twice to get it right, same old story. But I want to be a part of his life. So being able to do that and go out, and we've done 56 shows so far this year. By the time we end, it'll be 59. That's a lot of shows. On a band that's not had a hit, so to speak, in however long, 20 years, 30 years. So we're still able to go out and rock it as long as we sound good, and we're giving the people what they want. We'll do it. If it ever gets to a point where we can't do it well anymore, then we'll probably hang it up. But at this point, the band's firing on all cylinders. We really do get along. It's crazy. You hear of all these bands that don't get along. I couldn't imagine, doing that. That just doesn't sound like fun to me,
Absolutely. It's like stuck in a marriage that you fight every day.
Yeah, bogus, no thanks. I was in one of those when I was a little too, I think I got married too young maybe. My ex-wife's great. We get along fine, but it's just like, dude, that's just does not sound like fun to me.
Sure.
So we're really blessed that we all get along. We've got Robert Mason in the fold for 9 years now, going on 10. And he's great. He really does the old tunes justice, and the new stuff that we put out with him is a lot of fun. So 4 original guys with Mason out there. We miss Lane. There's nothing we can do about that, unfortunately. The one thing we can do is we can go out and play the tunes that he wrote that we all created together and recorded together very well every night, and that's how we pay our respects every night we play, man.
Well, that's it. You can't bring somebody back. Obviously, you tried for years to, make that work. Obviously, Janie's passed. He lives on, like you say, every night in these songs. But, Robert is such a professional. He brings it live. There's no drama. How important is that to have a front man? And what a rare occurrence. So you could actually replace someone and still be relevant, with your new album and everything.
It's crazy, no drama is crazy because we always had drama. Most bands do. It just depends on the level. but we always had it, and it was always just this anchor that just always that we take 10 steps forward, and then something would happen, and we take 5 steps back, and it was just a struggle to get it to keep on going. And Mason just brings it every single night. He's very important to him, to pay homage to the legacy of the band, and he takes it seriously. That's all I can tell you. And it's refreshing to be in a band with a guy that really takes it seriously. His health, everything he's got going on, he's the real deal. He's stepped into some big shoes, and it's not easy to sing those songs, man. Lane had a great voice, and I've seen guys try to do it. They just can't pull it off, Mason does every single night, So we're lucky, man, to have him. Absolutely.
Well, besides having a drink with friends and all that, we all grew up on the cliche of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but it's hard to be a touring professional, and especially a singer, to be able to give it every night if you're hungover and you got a habit and all that. I talked to so many of the bands, and sobriety's a great thing. You're able to actually enjoy more of the interaction with the fans and the experiences on stage, and of course the relationships between the band members. So how important is that these days, to have people that are on the path of being able to enjoy what they do without all the extras?
My band, there's guys that drink, there's guys that don't drink on the road, and the guys that drink on the road show up. They don't drink too much. They keep it together. The show's the most important thing. The guys that don't drink on the road don't drink because they don't want to drink, and there's never excess. It's not like somebody's, a glass of wine or two, to me, before a show, after a show, whatever, isn't a detriment to what's going on in the band. Nobody's getting drunk and going on stage and falling down and making an ass out of themselves. Having guys that can manage whatever they do in life, whatever gets them through to the next gig, is a fine thing. Nobody certainly is going to call anybody out and say, hey, man, you can't drink, you can't do that. If somebody got out of line in this band and it started to affect our live performance, it'd be a different story. But to say, I don't want anybody to think we're a sober band, because we're not. But we're definitely a band that takes what we do serious, and we show up and we play definitely to the best of our ability. And we don't let something get in the way of that. How's that?
Well, that's it. It's all about balance and, pacing yourself. You can have a good time. Just keep it in line and, be professional. Because like you say, the show is the main thing. These people pay money. Some of them travel a good distance to come see you. Last thing they want to see is a half-ass show because somebody's partying too hard before the set.
Yeah, that doesn't happen. People pick when they have fun, and but everybody shows up on time and everybody shows up ready to go.
Yeah.
And if they don't, there's words. But it doesn't happen, so it's not an issue. I mean, we had to deal with that for so long that I think everybody's just kind of like, the darkness portion of that is definitely not in this band.
Sure.
The darkness portion of addiction and it is dark, man, and it's sad, and it's something that we just don't tolerate, so it doesn't happen,
Well, we've lost so many greats, because of, dalliances and all that, but, it brings us to your latest album. Congratulations. Louder, Harder, Faster is an amazing album, and working with somebody like Jeff Pilson, who knows hits, man. He does it every night with Foreigner and, of course, Dokken and all that. Why was it important to have somebody like Jeff, and, what are you most proud of with the latest album?
Jeff, we've all known Jeff for a real long time, and nobody's ever really I haven't sat down and worked with him to the capacity we did when we started. It was just a year ago, this last Friday, we started pre-production with Jeff on this record that came out, Louder, Harder, Faster, in May on Frontier, and Jeff's amazing. I mean, he's just a musician 110%. So it was like sitting down with a sixth member of the band. He's got a great ear. He was able to what hit do you play? You know,
Yeah.
It's crazy. Even though maybe he wasn't a part of making those songs, he's very much a part of keeping them alive in today's world with Mick and Kelly and all those guys in that band. And it's just insane that he's just probably one of the most musical people I've met in our genre. And back when I saw Doc and back open for Priest on I think it was the Painkiller tour at LA Sports Arena, Jeff and Mick were the two funnest guys to watch. I love Don and George, don't get me wrong, but Jeff was a madman, you know. He's still got that same spirit, and it was a pleasure getting to work with him. It's something that I'll treasure in my music encyclopedia that I carry around with me. But he's a great guy, and I think it was the right choice.
Absolutely. We love everything he does, and the results with you guys speak volumes. And tell us about the decision to cover the Merle Haggard song. I know that's done some great things in the racing business for you.
So every once in a while we'll put out some bizarre cover, like on Cherry Pie. I think we did a Ricky Medlock tune, Train, and Ricky's a Friend, you know, and Skinnerd, and you know, he came from Blackfoot. I think his dad might have wrote that song, but Shorty Medlock. But anyways, long story short, there is a history of Warrant doing cover songs. It's not always the one you would think. Merle Haggard, let's just sit here and drink, came over from the guys at the PBR, the Pro Bull Riders Association. Buddy that runs that company, Sean,